Hello, welcome back to, of course, another video on the Live Shorts channel where, as you may have come to expect, I will be talking about the Labour Party. Specifically, I will be discussing a certain point made in a Labour hustings event held yesterday, if you're watching this on the day it's been recorded, in which Jeremy Corbyn and Owen Smith stood on a stage and essentially answered questions from the audience and discussed issues with each other, argued a little bit and made their political points clear. One of the things that Owen Smith said, which is what I want to discuss in this video, it's the main point of this video, is that Jeremy Corbyn only met up with him once in a 9-month period. When I heard this, I was quite worried, because I'm a Jeremy Corbyn supporter. I do not trust that Owen Smith will fight austerity in the passionate way that Jeremy will. Jeremy has spent much of his time hanging out with the people, not hanging out like he's just chilling on a sofa, spending time talking to the people of this country, attending rallies, making his message clear that austerity will not continue. And I just don't see that passion in Owen Smith. But he has a point. Meeting up with your Department of Work and Pensions leader once in 9 months it doesn't sound like it's good enough. And the reason why I don't think it sounds like it's good enough is because they are the Labour Party, the people who are supposed to be supporting the workers of this country. And the Department for Work and Pensions obviously is an important department for a working Labour Party. But I don't necessarily know whether this means that Jeremy is a bad leader, or whether Jeremy conducting himself in this way was all he was left with, As the leader of the Labour Party, he had a big job to do, Austerity is as bad as it's been in a very, very long time. And Jeremy seems like the kind of guy who would much rather go out on the streets talking to ordinary people than he would talking to his own party members. And mostly I respect that, but I can't help feeling that meeting up with your contemporaries, the people around you who are supposed to support you as a party once in 9 months it's not great, but it's also not awful. I'm not here to deride Jeremy and say that Owen Smith is better or that he's right to have pointed this out. Well, I suppose he's right to have pointed this out because it's always good to put information on the table. But Jeremy's response was that he felt it was okay that they met up once a week as part of the table that discussed shadow cabinet issues. And I don't know whether that's true or false. I don't know whether it's true or false to state that it's good enough to meet up once a week. I have no idea. But the more I think about it, the more I imagine Jeremy being busy doing this and that, always speaking to people, always rallying against the austerity measures in this country, trying to make things better, trying to make his voice heard in each town and each city, and simply not having enough time to speak to Owen Smith individually. 9 months is not ages. It's a long time in politics, but it's not a long time in the grand scheme of things. And there is one thing which I really need to point out, and that is that the Labour Party has 230 members of Parliament. And I don't know how many days there are in 9 months because I haven't bothered to do the maths, but I'm pretty sure it won't be much more than 230. And if Jeremy is to speak individually to each member of Parliament in his party more than once, that would take up more than 9 months worth of days of his time, because he's got lots of other things to do. And to fit that in, I can't imagine it happening. Though it is important to point out that Jeremy could meet up with multiple MPs in one day. Though I also thought about the fact that Owen is Welsh. I don't know how much time he spends at his Welsh office in Wales. But to make that kind of trip as the newly elected member of the Labour Party, you know, I don't know whether that's viable or not. I don't know whether that would help the party or not, whether Jeremy could be doing better things, you know? They can talk over the phone. Owen never mentions how many phone calls he takes from Jeremy, things like that. I get the general sense that, simply put, Labour supporters, the general public in general, are simply not given enough information to understand whether claims made by the politicians that they listen to are well-made points, or whether they're disguising the truth, not giving us enough information. We are not getting the right amount of information to make up our mind on things like the issue I'm talking about in this video, on the issue of whether Jeremy really should be meeting up with Owen more than once in 9 months. Of course, as someone who supports Jeremy, I've also got to sit here and think. About whether Jeremy has had these accusations made against him because people like Owen genuinely do not like the fact that Jeremy only met up with him once in 9 months, or whether they're trying to tarnish his name, drag his name through the mud in order to oust him because he is more left-wing than them. It's, how am I supposed to know, you know? How am I supposed to know what's going on in Owen Smith's head? I have to admit, when I see news articles from very, very left-wing publications, and they're talking about Owen Smith as if he's basically evil, I can't get on board with that idea. I'm a Jeremy Corbyn supporter, but I just can't imagine that people like Owen Smith are these horrible people who don't want to do anything for the working class. Because I've seen interviews with Owen Smith months and months and months before anybody really knew who he was. And back then, he was talking about austerity and the cuts made by the Conservatives. But what I do believe is that Owen Smith will dramatically water down his proper left-wing policies in order to suit the common voter. And Jeremy will not do this. He will fight for what I believe, what he believes, what millions of people believe is right. And that's why I support Jeremy Corbyn. And the constituency Labour parties overwhelmingly have come out in favour of Jeremy as well. Is Jeremy electable as the new Prime Minister of this country? We don't know yet. Some of the polls suggest no, other statistics suggest yes. But is Owen? I highly doubt that he's more electable than Jeremy, considering that he came out of nowhere, considering that he's got, you know, no charisma. I don't get a sense that this man has a heart that you can see and really get your head around. You know who Jeremy is. He makes it very clear what he's passionate about, and you believe him when he says it. And people relate to that in a way that they never would with Owen, you know? And you've got to question whether people who really support Jeremy Corbyn now will still vote for Labour if Owen was to be elected the leader. We don't know that. There's so many things up in the air. There's so many things that we just can't work out, and that's the problem when I make videos like this. You know, I get comments from people saying things like, oh, you seem as if you aren't basically supporting Jeremy as much as you should. But I'm just throwing ideas out there, you know. You get information every day, and you never get the sum total of the truth. You only get little nuggets of information. How am I supposed to make up my mind about whether 9 months and one meeting is good enough? I don't know. You know? I don't know. Perhaps Jeremy simply didn't have the wit to say, and I'm not criticising him when I say this, the wit to say, well, you know, we did have various phone calls, but I never actually met up with you more than once because I was a busy man. You know, if so, no one would ever do this, but if someone put a gun to my head and said, do you think Jeremy Corbyn is doing enough for his own party members by getting out there on the streets and making sure that people hear the anti-austerity message. Do you think once in 9 months is good enough? You know, I think I would say yes, because I believe that Jeremy is a very sincere man who passionately, he musters up more passion than I've seen in any genuine politician in my lifetime. So the fact that he has met up with Jeremy, with Owen only once, if someone put a gun to my head and said, is that good enough? I would say, yes, it is. But it's still all up in the air. I don't know. You know, how are we supposed to know? It's so difficult for us to understand as the common voter. Especially when you have these publications who were previously quite left-wing, who are now becoming more and more right-wing by the day, like The Guardian, like the Huffington Post, bringing out so much negative information about Jeremy that it's almost like you barely hear anything positive, unless you're following The Canary, who are a slightly smaller online publication who sometimes go a bit over the top in the way they talk about things, but they support Jeremy and you can get positive information from that side. How are we supposed to make our mind up? I do not know, but please don't think that this means I don't support Jeremy. I think he's the good guy in this, you know. Maybe his party feel that he doesn't spend enough time with them, you know, like a neglected boyfriend or girlfriend, but they don't understand that he's doing a more important job, which is speaking to the people of this country whose hearts and minds need to be changed, which is what Owen and other Blairites, if I'm even allowed to say that, talk about. They talk about winning the hearts and minds of the people, and they don't believe Jeremy will do that, but that's what he does on the streets. And then they turn around and say, Jeremy's not spending enough time talking to us individually. It's hard to know what to believe. But I can't help thinking that, you know, if you are a member of Parliament who has got such a prestigious job as the Shadow Secretary for the Department of Work and Pensions, you should, to a large extent, be able to get on with that job with an immense amount of confidence yourself, without having to speak to Jeremy and ask what he wants, you know. If you're having a meeting once a week in which he can set the agenda, then shouldn't you be able to go off and do your own thing, you know? If he's got people to talk to around the country. Yeah, I think that's how I'm going to conclude this video. That sounds about right to me. You know, such a prestigious job as the Shadow Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Work and Pensions should be strong enough to get on with his own job and be instructed on how to conduct himself once a week around the Shadow Cabinet table when they all talk as members of the Shadow Cabinet. You know, if he expects to be the leader of the Labour Party, then you know, why does he need Jeremy Corbyn as his very strong advisor? Oh, I don't know. I mean, there's been so many issues to do with work and pensions this year, and it's really difficult to get your head around. I don't know. I'm going to have to end this video because now it's like I'm talking to myself. Thank you very much for watching. I'd love it if you liked this. I'd love it if you subscribed, because there'll be more content like this coming out. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.